What is your biggest fear in life? I know that when I was growing up, one of my biggest fears was riding a roller coaster. Couldn't stand that thing. Why would I ever get on a cart, trusting those little harnesses flying through the airs on some track that I'm putting all my faith in that I won't fall out? But when I got into college, I decided that I was going to conquer that fear one step at a time. I was offered this opportunity to ride one of these large, massive swings that you might have seen that drops you from about 80 to 100 feet up, and then you just come soaring through the air in one big swoop on this swing. However, in true fashion, I decided that I wasn't just going to ride this swing normally. I was going to ride this swing sitting backwards. Because why not? Let's just add a little bit more fear into it so we can really get all of the fear just right up and out of me. Next thing you know, I'm flying backwards through the air, having the time of my life. Now you can find me trying to persuade my wife to try to ride every single roller coaster possible, having no fear, loving the adrenaline that you get from it. And I even have an end goal of going skydiving one day, if anybody would like to join me. Because nothing says fun like free falling from a plane thousands of feet in the air, right? Well, did you know that the word fear, or a version of that word, is used 520 times in the Bible? Starting in Genesis 9:2, after the flood had ended and Noah and his family exited the ark. And then it ends, the last one is mentioned in Revelation 19:5, when rejoicing in heaven is spoken of. I mention all of this because I was reading this article this past week from a leading psychotherapist and instructor at Northeastern University. And she came up with this list of the top 10 fears that hold people back in life. At number 1, she had change. When we think about change, we have to realize that the world that we're living in is an ever-changing world, isn't it? It's happening more and more rapidly every day. Despite this fact, though, many people fear what? They fear change. They simply try to resist it. This can cause us to miss out on a handful of opportunities that come our way throughout life. We can even run the risk of staying stagnant and staying stuck in a rut, all because we avoid change because we fear it. Typically, this is where you hear the great and well-known phrase, "This is how we've always done it." The second one that she mentions is loneliness. The fear of loneliness can sometimes cause people to resist living alone, or even stay in a bad, unhealthy relationship simply because they're afraid of being by themselves. You'll see people keeping the same friend group simply because they're afraid of the change and then not having anyone in their life. And while it's smart to fight off loneliness, because studies do show that it's just as harmful as your health as smoking is, we have to have the right people surrounding us. We have to be surrounded by the right people in heavenly social interactions. Number 3, she listed failures. One of the most common fears on earth is the fear of failure, the fear of falling short. It's embarrassing to fail, isn't it? It's not fun. No one wants to fail. And it may even reinforce our beliefs that we don't measure up to the standard that the world wants us to measure up to. We might even avoid doing certain things, all because there isn't success guaranteed. Ultimately, we'll miss out on a lot of things in life simply because we're afraid of failing. The old saying is true: you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. The fourth thing she listed was rejection. Many people avoid things like meeting new people or even trying to enter into a new relationship because of the fear of being rejected, the fear of someone not accepting you. Even individuals that already find themselves married for a handful of years might avoid asking their longtime spouse something because they imagine they might just reject it and say no. The fear of rejection can keep us stuck. And while rejection stings, it doesn't hurt as much as a missed opportunity that you might have had. Number 5, she listed uncertainty. Isn't there a lot of uncertainty today? People often avoid trying something different for a fear of uncertainty. After all, there's no guarantee that doing something new will make any difference at all. But staying the same is a surefire way to stay stagnant. Whether you're afraid of accepting a new job or moving to a new city or wherever it might be, we can't let the fear of uncertainty hold us back from something greater. At number 6, she listed something bad happening. It's an unfortunate, inevitable fact that bad things will happen in life. They're going to. And sometimes the fear of doom prevents us from doing what? Prevents us from enjoying life. We can't prevent bad things from happening all the time, but we can't let the fear of that stop us from living the life that Christ has called us to live. Well, if we do this over here, then this will happen. If I do this over here, then this will happen. And you start going down this whole laundry list. If I drink out of plastic bottles, I will now have this into my body. If I eat this over here, they use these pesticides over here. And all of a sudden, we spend all of our time planning for what? Planning for the worst instead of looking for the future, which is the greatest promise that we have. At number 7, she lists getting hurt. Hopefully, whenever you were growing up, your parents or some trusted adult taught you to look both ways before crossing the street. That way you don't get hurt. But quite often, our fears of getting hurt cause us to become emotionally overprotective of ourselves. Our fear of uncomfortable feelings or maybe being hurt by someone, the emotional wounds might prevent us from making a deep, meaningful connection with somebody else. We might even fail to open up because we could end up hurt if we open up and tell people too much about us. At number 8, she listed being judged. Isn't it normal to want to be liked? But the fearing judge can prevent us from being our true selves. We try to behave this certain way around this group of people, then we act this certain way over here around this group of people, all because we don't want to be judged. We just have to realize that the truth is, some people are going to judge us harshly no matter what we do. At number 9, she listed inadequacy, not having self-confidence. Another fear shared by many of people, it's not being good enough. If we feel like we don't measure up, we might become an underachiever. Or we might even become a perfectionist in an effort to prove our own self-worth. The fear of inadequacy can be a deep-rooted and hard thing to overcome, a hard thing to face head-on. We have to understand who we belong to. At number 10, she listed the loss of freedom. A certain amount of this fear can be healthy, I guess you could say, but it becomes a problem when it holds us back in life. We end up with the attitude of, don't tell me that I have to do that, although that thing they might be saying that you should do is actually good for you. It doesn't cause you to lose freedom at all. So if you look at the words fear and faith, you can see something extremely interesting. If you were to ask someone right now what faith is, you'll get one of two answers most likely. It's a belief or belief that leads to some kind of reaction. Well, when you look at the word fear, it becomes almost the identical thought. Because fear is not something that has happened, but instead fear is a thought that something could happen, but it hasn't happened yet. We have a fear because we believe that this or that will occur in our life, and therefore we flee from it, or we just freeze up. We start to stress, we start to panic, and we start to plan our entire day over things that haven't even happened yet. We ever do that? Because we have this thought in the back of our head that is causing us to fear. When you look at facing fear head on, my mind instantly goes to Daniel 3. Where we read the marvelous story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The story begins like this. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Does this sound like our world today? They are essentially saying, do this or we're going to cancel you. Do this or we're going to get rid of you. We're going to ruin everything that you've known in your life. We're going to get rid of that if you don't do this. These individuals and many others are faced with a do this scenario, or your life will end in a fiery furnace. Doesn't sound very pleasing, does it? Even knowing that death was their punishment, these faithful three understood that the real value of their life was not found here on earth, but instead in the eyes of the living God. In our life today, we should not be striving to live long, but instead we should be striving to live right, which is something that these three knew and understood. It was useless to them if they lived a long life, yet forsake the living God that loved them so much. It was of no advantage to them. That was of no good. So Nebuchadnezzar, in all of his furious rage, brings the three before him as we pick up in verse 14. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Now the three are faced with the ultimate decision. They're now before the king, and he is commanding them to worship the golden image that who made? That he made. He made it himself, and he set it up before the people, essentially taunting them just like Goliath taunted David and his living God that couldn't come down and take him out. He is taunting them, saying, no God can save you from my hands. Nobody is, because he's built himself up to be his own God. So it is now a do this or what? Then we'll kill you scenario. And what do they say? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." You want to talk about faith? Right here it is. They're faced with death, and the response is what? If this be so, our God, who we serve, will do what? He's able to deliver us. That's a beautiful and powerful thing to say. Do we approach our life that way today? I'm afraid we don't enough of the time. Could you imagine how powerful this would be? Do this, or we'll take away your job. If this be so, our God whom we serve, he's able to deliver us. We'll do this over here. We're going to stop hanging out with you. We're going to stop being your friend. We'll cut you off from everything you know. If this be so, our God whom we serve, he's able to deliver us. Do this or the world is going to judge you. They're going to say harsh things about you. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to what? To deliver us. Do this or insert whatever the world might threaten you with. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. This one time back in high school, we had a really wild and interesting fundraiser opportunity, I guess you could say. We did all the typical things like car washes and sell little coupons and things like this. But this one time, Coach came to us and said that this local corn maze, which are over here next to Apple Barn, great food by the way, this local corn maze wanted to have a haunted corn maze, as they called it. and they offered us the opportunity to be the people to scare people. And then in return, we would get to keep a portion of the proceeds from that night. Well, being a bunch of high school boys, we loved the idea. It was a marvelous idea. We thought it'd be a ton of fun. So group by group, people would come through the corn maze and we'd jump out and we'd scare them, coming up with all kind of different tactics to get them to scream more and more. Some would take off running, screaming, while others would just freeze in place and just scream in fear. That was until this one guy came through. Step by step, he's getting closer and closer to us, and it's the perfect time. We all jump out to scare him, and what does he do? He just smiles and says hi and keeps on walking. All of us kind of stood there in a bit of disbelief, looking around at each other like, how did that not scare him? This is no fun if he's not scared of us. That's why we're here. That's why we find enjoyment out of this. But we were unable to scare him. Family, there's something powerful about a Christian who's not scared of anything. There's something real powerful about it. Some people will accuse that person of being arrogant because they seem to think they can handle everything. They can conquer anything that's put before them. But is that really so? Because in reality, it sure seems like they're living out exactly what is said here in this story. God is able to deliver us. Doesn't matter what I face. God will provide, as Abraham said. Therefore, why should I fear? Because I know, I have confidence that God can deliver us. Oh, how powerful the family of God would be if we all took this mindset in everything we do. That's fine. You can have my job. God's going to provide. God's going to provide a way for me and my family. That's fine. You don't have to be my friend if you want me to fall into all those things of the world, because I have a friend and his name is Jesus. That's fine. You can take away my physical life, put me to death, just like they tried to do to these three. It's okay, because I have a better life awaiting me in a place called heaven with my friend named Jesus. Oh, how powerful that would be if that's how we lived our life. When we turn back to this story, in verse 19 it says this: Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar really turned up the temperature, didn't he? Is that what the world does to us? You're going to go against me? Let me just turn that temperature up a little bit more. Their fury overtakes them. He heated up 7 times more than what he normally does. Then he has 3 of his men bind him up and take him up, cast him into the fire that at this point is overheated, which actually ends up killing the men that he had take them up there. And the 3 are cast into the fire and they fall in. And you just know that Nebuchadnezzar was about to sit back, relax, and count his victory. Count his win. Yet this is not how it ends as we pick up the story in verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Do we not cast 3 men bound into fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Can you imagine this scene? You're so upset, 3 people refuse to worship you, that you cranked up the fire 7 times higher than normal. It was so overheated that it killed your own men. Yet as the 3 you were angry, fell into the fire, you looked up, and they were just walking around. Family, don't doubt the power of the living God. Nebuchadnezzar thought he had it all figured out. Thought he could burn them up with the fire. Yet he failed to realize that the living God was the one that created the flame to begin with. And the flame was under the living God's control. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. Their hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of the fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than service and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb for limb and their house laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. The fire had done nothing to them. It didn't even singe a single hair of their head. After realizing this, Nebuchadnezzar said something profound that I hope all of us can take with us when we leave here this morning. They yielded up what? They yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. You see, family, what these three had realized and understood is that this life is not the life. This life is just temporary because we're just passing through, because this world is not our home. You see, the true life is awaiting us in heaven. It's not awaiting us here. Yet so often we try to hold on to everything that this world has to offer us. And we fail to realize that what this world has to offer fails to compare with what Jesus offers us. It fails to compare to the wonders of heaven. It fails to even come close to giving us the inheritance that we're promised one day when we reach heaven. It's not even close. This life isn't the end, and praise God for that, because we have something so much greater awaiting us. It's just the beginning. We can learn a lot about living out our life fearlessly from these three. Think back to the 10 great fears that we mentioned at the very beginning. Change. It's scary, isn't it? And change is what Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to do. He wanted them to change their conduct and worship them instead of worshiping their God. However, they realized that a much greater change was before them, because soon a change is coming where our mortal bodies, well, they'll be changed to immortal bodies. And we'll enter into the most marvelous place not made with human hands. Listen to 1 Corinthians 15. I tell you this, brothers, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkle of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will rise imperishable, and we shall be changed. For the perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immorality. Are you not happy that we're going to have change one day? This earthly body is breaking down, isn't it? You got any pain today? It's breaking down, but guess what? It'll be transformed into something so much greater. Not only that, we know that what? This world's going to change, isn't it? It's changing right now before our eyes. But the living God is the same today as He was yesterday, as He will be tomorrow. A God that created time doesn't need to change with the time like the world keeps telling it to. Feeling alone can be one of the worst feelings in life. But look back, and what can we learn from these three? What a beautiful example of how the family of God should stick together during persecution. Did they all separate? Did two of them turn back and just leave one? No. All three of them went into the fire. Not only that, the three knew that they weren't alone, because guess what? Someone greater was with them. Listen to Deuteronomy 31:8. Is it the Lord who goes before you? He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Deuteronomy 31:8. Or what about Isaiah 41:10? It says this, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. You see, in this world, we might have moments where we feel alone, and we might feel separated from everybody. But one person is always by our side, and that is the living God. Our friends in this world might let us down. They might abandon us. They might not live up to what we might need them to be. But the friend that we have in Jesus, He says He will never leave nor forsake us. What a beautiful thing that is. We can walk through the fires of this world and know that the living God is holding our hand every single step. What about failure? So often we put limitations on God, as we talked about our Bible study this morning, acting like He doesn't have the power to conquer the obstacles that lie right there before us. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that God's power was greater than any fire that anybody on earth could ever make and throw them into. We have to remember the same truth so we don't fail to take some of the same opportunities in life that are presented before us. Sometimes we spend all of our energy thinking about how we can't accomplish something instead of thinking about how God can accomplish that task. Hold on to Philippians 4:13, where we learn this. I can do all things through Him who does what? Who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. Never forget who strengthens you. We have this fear of failure because we think we have to build up all of our own strength to take care of all of these tasks. Yet the strength that we need does not come from us. It doesn't come from mankind, but instead it comes from who? The Creator of mankind. Rejection. Few things in life feel worse than rejection. The feeling of not being good enough overcomes us, and we just feel defeated, don't we? Yet we have the opportunity to belong to a person that was rejected by His own creation. Yet guess what? He's still calling us home. He's not rejecting us. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were rejected by the king and others for doing what? For not worshiping an idol. However, the three knew that they had to hold fast to God, and at the end, they would be embraced, not rejected. Listen to Psalm 94:14. For the Lord will not forsake His people. He will not abandon His heritage. Uncertainty. My goodness, is there a lot of uncertainty out there, isn't it? We just went through about 3 years of uncertainty. People were buying up everything in the store because they were uncertain what might be on the shelf tomorrow. So they just bought all of it. The king thought he had it all figured out until he saw people walking around in the fire that he was so proud of. Boy, it's cranked up 7 times higher than normal. You see, we try to plan ahead and we make plans for this, we make plans for that. But for a Christian, we should not feel uncertain because we know this truth from Matthew 6, where Jesus tells us this. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you of not more value than they? And which of you, being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? He says, stop being so anxious about tomorrow because it won't add a single hour to your life anyways. Why are you worrying about tomorrow when we have to first conquer today? Because tomorrow is not even promised. On top of that, we need to reflect back on what we learned from the story in Daniel. What will God do? God will what? God will deliver us. We need to trust that. We need to know that. The world wants us to be uncertain about all types of things. But family, we need to be certain that we have a salvation that saves, and we need to know that we have a living God that is capable of doing exactly what He has promised to do. That's what we can put our certainty in. We don't have to be uncertain because our God most certainly can do exactly what He has promised to do. Something bad happening. Challenging times in life will happen. Simply look at these three. They knew what typically happened when people are thrown into a fire. You typically don't make it out of that, do you? I don't think I would. And I'm sure they noticed that the men who carried them up died from the fire before they could even put them in because it was so hot. Yet they knew that God was going to provide in whatever moment they found them in. Such great comfort can be found in Isaiah 41:13 when it says this, "For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not, I am the one who helps you." Praise God that we don't have to do it all alone. Getting hurt. The world will leave you hurt if you put your faith and trust in it. It'll do it every single time. Yet these three knew that they would get hurt if they didn't follow the orders of the king. However, they understood that their living God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, from Psalms 147, verse 3. Aren't you thankful that we have a God that can heal our brokenness, that can mend us back together at the foot of the cross? Isn't that a marvelous and beautiful thing? What about being judged? But the world's going to judge me. The world won't like me if I do this or that over here. If I say that you shouldn't follow this. Assurance can be found in John 15. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. These three experienced this firsthand. Yet they remembered that this world, it wasn't their home. They were simply passing through to something so much greater. What about being inadequate? Low self-esteem. Does anybody feel inadequate or have low self-esteem at any time? Feel like you just aren't good enough and you'll never be good enough. Isn't that the way the world wants you to think? Listen to 1 Corinthians 3, or 2 Corinthians 3. Such is the confidence that we have through Christ towards God. Not that we are sufficient in ourselves to claim anything as coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God. The word sufficiency carries the meaning of being qualified and capable. Well, why am I capable? Why am I qualified? Because the living God is holding my hand all throughout life. That's why I'm capable of taking on today. That's why I'm capable of conquering today. And my power and my strength comes from above. The world doesn't think that I'm good enough, and that's fine, because Jesus does. Loss of freedom. The world will teach and preach that all these things in the world has to offer, they'll set you free. This help book over here will help with this, and then this book over here will help with this, and it'll help with all these marvelous things, so on and so forth. Yet true freedom is only found in one place and one place alone. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed, John 8:36. You see, when you accept Christ into your life, you don't lose freedom, you gain it. This world thinks that it knows what freedom is, but nothing compares to the freedom that is found in Christ and Christ alone. I'll close with this. Christ has not called you to live a life full of fear, full of not feeling good enough, full of feeling like you're failing, full of uncertainty. Instead, God has called you to live life fearlessly because we serve a God that can save. We serve a God that truly cares for us. We serve a God that is much greater than any single obstacle we face here on earth. So don't live a life that's full of fear, but instead live every day with freedom, knowing that you're loved and set free by Christ. Those fears are all fears of the world. But we have someone so much greater that takes care of us. Promises that He'll never leave or forsake us. If God is for us, who can be against us? If you have any of those fears this morning, feel like you're holding you back, feel like you're not good enough, I promise you that you're good enough in God's eyes. Feeling like you can't live up to the expectations of the world, God's got something better for you in life. The world tells you have to do X, Y, and Z. God says, follow me, and I will give you eternal life. If you're ready to live fearlessly, give up those things this morning. Follow the God that truly cares. Follow the God that can cast away all those fears, because God will deliver us on that final day, and it's a marvelous and beautiful thing. If you're ready to give your life to Christ, come forward as we stand and sing. Mark.